glad you can join us. I know that Sunday service can just be super hard, especially online. Um, but just know that church isn't just Sunday. And church isn't just a service, church isn't a building, it's a people. And so I encourage you that even though we're only online for church, that you make plans to meet up with people and to have dinner and fellowship and maybe even watch and do service together in your house, right? Um, I think I'll make this whole season at least like 1.2 times better than what it is, if not like 10 times better. Who's ever heard of Hallmark movies, especially Christmas Hallmark movies? I know a person who forces us to watch these movies every Christmas, and a part of me cringes at it, not because it's like bad. No, well, the acting isn't great, but it's because it's like the same storyline over and over and over again, right? It's the exact same storyline, just different settings. And the main storyline is always female lead who has some internal problem with love and with Christmas. And then suddenly, magically, male lead pops in, sweeps them off their feet. They fall in love and through just a bunch of coincidences. And always at the end, they end up together and they both love Christmas. And that's just the storyline with any setting. So a bake shop owner who suddenly falls in love and loves Christmas and now bakes for the whole town. It's always a small town. A museum curator who suddenly falls in love and also loves Christmas and has like a gallery tour for their small town. Or a busy CEO power woman who suddenly falls in love and also loves Christmas and donates to some charity for the small town. And it's just the same thing over and over again. And while it's repetitive, I get why people enjoy it. It's the ultimate romance you could want, right? It's about this love that comes sweeping in like a tornado. It swirls you around and it changes just your whole life. And I think this is actually the kind of love that most people are looking for. One that has the spark, that's what, when you're looking for a partner, you need that spark. Unparalleled chemistry, a love that leaves us helpless and giggly, infatuated. It's uncontrollable, right? And I think that's why we call it falling in love. No one chooses to fall. It happens to us almost like accidentally, and we're victims of it. And trust me, I get the appeal. I love Disney movies because this is the same storyline, right? It's the epitome of romance in our culture. And yet, in real life, this approach to love, where love happens to us, we're passive to it, it controls us, it doesn't seem like it's working. Relationships, common law, dating, marriages, they all seem to have really, really high failure rates. And that's a scary thought because these relationships are among the most important that we build our lives on. But if helplessly falling in love and being forcefully, swept off our feet isn't the best way to approach our love life, then what is? Well, let's look at Exodus 20:14. It's a short verse, and it's this. You shall not commit adultery. Short and simple. A simple definition of adultery would be where people sleep around with others and betray their marriages. And I think when we read a passage like this, we pass right by it. We don't even give it a second thought. Why? Because it's like the biggest no duh commandment ever, right? No one gets into a serious relationship or marriage thinking, I'm going to betray my partner and cheat on this person. No one does that, right? And if you do, then maybe get help. But I think this actually needs a deeper and a second look because the reality is it happens. And it happens so frequently as well. But there's more to this commandment, right? To understand it properly, I think we need to understand what's it doing in the 10 Commandments. As we've been going through our series, we're looking at the Ten Commandments as more than just a set of random rules that we memorize and we follow, but rather it's where God is claiming control and sovereignty over all dimensions of our lives. And in this commandment about adultery, I think the full meaning of it is that we need to give God control of our whole love life. Not just the physical part, but also the emotions and the thoughts. And that's how Jesus reads this commandment. So let's read what Jesus said in Matthew 5:27-28. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. We read this and it's like, dude, Jesus just made this commandment 100 times harder, right? Because he's saying it's not about the physical cheating on your spouse. It's about taking complete control over your heart and your mind so that you can never even get to a place where you cheat. And this is our focus today, okay? Our focus is, what is God's plan for our love life? We have 2 points to make. The first one is we need to control our emotions. The second is we need to control our thoughts. Let's start with the first one. We need to control our emotions. I remember my first significant crush. I was in grade 6. I know, I was young. But people are having that even younger nowadays. But anyways, in the other grade 6 class, there was a Chinese girl, and she was very pretty. And she's one of the smartest girls in her class. And she was so kind to everyone, and she smiled a lot. And everything about her was just cute, you know, like she had Hello Kitty pens and pencils and pencil cases. I don't know why I noticed this, but she had her long black hair in a high ponytail often. And so when she walked around or ran or played sports or whatever, it would even bounce in like a cute way. And I'm just helplessly hooked, okay? And I thought about her all the time. A lot of times at school, whatever I did, in the back of my head, I'd always be wondering if she was looking at me, if I was being noticed by her, you know? And so because of that, I acted in a completely different way than I would usually. It felt like my body was possessed by someone else. I have this one really stupid memory that I'm almost too embarrassed to share. She lived across a park that had a playground. And one day, for some reason, I rode my bike to that park and I played there by myself for a whole hour. And I think my hope was that she would somehow look out the window and see me. And I completely just didn't think it through, okay? Because, I mean, me saying it now is more creepy than anything. That's like stalkerish vibes. But let's hypothetically say that she did see me. What did I expect her to think about me? Oh, whoa, hey, look at Tim playing by himself on the monkey bars. So cool. I'm so into him. No, right? Nothing about that makes sense. So the feelings of love and attraction is weird. It's weird like that, right? It makes us temporarily insane and irrational. And for some reason, that's considered romantic nowadays. These uncontrollable emotions that overwhelms us. But there's one problem with that, actually quite a few, but the main one I see is people helplessly fall in love, but they also helplessly fall out of love. And eventually, if you follow that pattern, the relationship would die, right? In Canada, 40% of marriages end in divorce. And in a survey in 2019, about 1 in 6 married people confess that they have physically cheated on their spouse while married. Now, while we think that's a high number, those are only the people who've confessed, right? Not many people would confess to that. So the real number is probably even higher. And that example they're only the marriages that have extremely noticeable problems like divorce and affairs. But there are so many relationships that are simply unhappy, right? And even though they haven't divorced yet, we can't really call their marriage a success. So I think it's safe to say most marriages are not the way that they're supposed to be. And while that is just so sad, as a fact, most marriages, sorry, as so sad as a fact, it makes complete sense, doesn't it? Because let's say while you were single, while you were dating, while you were engaged, you let yourself be controlled by the feeling of love, sexual attraction, intimacy, infatuation. Who's to say that that's going to stop when you are married, right? You're still going to let yourself be controlled in your marriage by your emotions. But by then, so let's say months or years into it, those emotions aren't going to be like giddy and exciting. No, they're going to become like far from positive or romantic at all. And thankfully, I think the Bible teaches us that there's a better way to love each other. Biblical love is not based on feelings. Biblical love is a choice that is informed by God's love and grace that was first given to us. And so choosing this choice, choosing to love means that we willfully and intentionally commit to another person's like best interests, whether you feel like it or not. And that's why Jesus can say something seemingly ridiculous like love your enemies. If we in our Western culture think of love as this like warm fuzzy feeling, as this intense uncontrollable emotion that moves us, that controls us, right? Then it is impossible to love people who are not lovable. But rather, if it's this willful decision to act in a way that is best for others because of your relationship with God, then we can truly love everyone. Now, I think the hope is that as we are continuing to grow spiritually and continuing to become more like Jesus, these two separate ideas of, love as a feeling and love as a choice will slowly come closer together and start merging. And we can both feel love and live out love for our neighbors. But when we're starting off, our emotions will not guide us well. And so we have to choose to love others properly. Now, in regards to our love life, being proactive and in control of our emotions and feelings has many different implications depending on the different stages of life that you're in. So just for a few minutes, we're going to brainstorm what that looks like to those who are married, those who are dating, those who are single. For married people, most likely you and your partner are no longer these star-crossed lovers who are just like struggling with uncontrollable infatuation and attraction, but rather it's the opposite. Those emotions that once gave you butterflies when you got a text from your partner have now turned into emotions like apathy, a lack of emotion, or annoyance, or even anger and bitterness. But despite all of those things, we're still called to love, to choose love. And so to protect our marriages, I think one of the most key things you can do is to see your spouse as a friend and to intentionally choose to build on that friendship every day. So do the things that made you attracted to each other in the first place. Find reasons to laugh together, to smile together, surprise each other with small gifts. Who cares about how many dollars you lose? Okay, well, not like spend $5, Invest in your marriage because it is crucial, not only for your long-term happiness, but also for God's mission. For those who are dating, unlike married people, you actually get to be in that exciting phase of attraction, sexual impulse, and infatuation. I feel like a gross high school counselor or whatever. Okay, but I would just want to say that it is worthwhile to think about what it means for your relationship and even your life direction to be in control of all those very strong emotions now. Because if you aren't in control now, then what does it mean for your relationship down the road when your emotions of attraction leaves? Or even worse, it moves to someone who's not your spouse. Are you still going to let yourself be controlled by your feelings? And maybe you're telling yourself, No, future me is going to be like 10 times more responsible than me now. That's a dangerous gamble. And many people have failed that bet. So I think you need to start building that strong foundation for your relationship in the good times. I think it's wise to use your dating years as time to practice the unconditional love of God for each other, to learn to treat each other well and respectfully, even when it's hard or unfair. And be intentional about setting your relationship on the same worthy goals. Because as you join God in His work as a couple, your common mission will help you be that much more stronger in your married life later on. Finally, for those who are single and interested in a healthy love life, this is so cliche, but it's true. The best thing you can do is to get things right with God first. Because when you are on the right track with God, you'll be far better at choosing a partner because the end goal is no longer that person, but rather God and His promises and building into the kingdom, right? And so you can make decisions with that much more clarity. So make sure you keep working at your relationship with God. Don't just read the Bible before you sleep. No, wrestle with it, work with it, let it change you. Don't just attend church, own the experience, make it work for you. Because the reality is, whether you marry or not, in the long run, a good relationship with God is far more satisfying than even the most perfect marriages. Our second point today is we need to control our thoughts. We're looking at a story in the Old Testament about King David. Israel's most loved and respected king was King David. And he was this man who made Israel very rich, won countless battles, and most importantly, was considered someone who was very, very close to God, to the point where he is known as the person after God's own heart. But as admirable as he was, his flaws were just as great. And I think that one of his biggest mistakes and turning point of his life even is sleeping with a woman named Bathsheba. We'll read it here in 1 Samuel 11, 1-4, 8. In the spring, at a time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. That messenger, the man, said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to go get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. As the story goes on, David sends Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, who was one of David's closest and most loyal friends, out to battle to die so that he could marry Bathsheba. And it's just such a tragic story. And many people think that it all started when David and Bathsheba slept together, but no, I think it started way before that, right? It started with his thoughts. Because before he slept with her, he sent messengers to inquire about her and to go get her. But even before that, it started with him ignoring his responsibilities, not fulfilling him as a king, as being with the army as the commander, but rather being idle and catching a glimpse of Bathsheba bathing on his stroll on the rooftop. And instead of looking away and leaving the area, he stayed. He let his thoughts run wild. He fantasized. He played that movie in his head about her. And so this tragic story started with David's inability to control his thoughts. I think this is why Jesus, during his Sermon on the Mount, raises the standard for adultery. He says in Matthew 5:28, and where we're going to read the literal translation just so we understand it better. He says this: "Everyone looking upon a woman in order to lust after her already has committed adultery with her in his heart. We read that because I just want to point out that it's not wrong to be attracted to someone, right? Or just state your preference and say, oh, that person is charming or handsome or beautiful. No, right? It becomes wrong when it turns into a very intentional stop and pause to fantasize about that person, right? There's a huge, so sorry if this is vulgar, but there's a huge difference between thinking someone is pretty and like mentally stripping them in your mind. That's what David did, and the result of his lustful thoughts led to just an atrocity. I think the same can be said about all atrocities of this kind, of this type, in our world. Things like porn industries, and rape, and sex trafficking, slavery, even vengeful and love-motivated murder. It starts with people's thoughts and where they allow their imagination to wander. And let's say, even if you're convinced that you can simply keep your thoughts hidden and never act on it, I just want to say that the very act of lusting in your mind is already terribly offensive to God and to others. In our Ten Commandments series, how we love others is simply an extension of how we love God. And it is heavily based on the idea that all people are created in God's image. And the book of James makes this connection really clear when he says that it makes absolutely no sense for us to worship God with our tongues, I don't know why I list there, and with the very same tongues, curse people who are made in God's image, who represent God, who have God's likeness. And so now when we lust after someone, when you're playing those scenarios and fantasies in your head, whether you're by yourself or you're around them, or it's through porn, or if it's through movies, what's actually happening in your mind is that you're taking a human being who is just beautifully and wonderfully created in God's image and likeness, who is just miraculously complex in all their experiences and their personality traits, and who is just so precious, not to only those who are around them in their social circles, but to God, to the point that Jesus died for them. When you lust after that person, you're reducing all of that, that image bearer of God, representative of God, to simply a tool, an object, a means for your pleasure. Let that seep in for a second. You're taking all of that beautiful person that God has uniquely and beautifully created, and you're just reducing them to an object for your pleasure. And I think that is maximally offensive to the person you're thinking about and to God. And the more you do it, okay, the more you let your thoughts run wild like that, the more it changes the way you think about people and how you see people, and it naturally corrupts your relationships. So it's very much worth it to stop sexual sin, even if it's only in your minds, because it's harmful to everyone, especially yourself. We need to get rid of these harmful thoughts before they turn into feelings and actions. If you look back at King David's story, I think that he shows us the importance of being on track with God and focus on his mission for us. Because David's downfall started off with him slacking in his responsibilities, slacking in his mission, right? And so in your life, be focused on things that are worthy, that are beautiful, that are excellent, that are praiseworthy. And one of the best ways to do this is to depend on the community. Place trustworthy people, not just anyone, in a position where you can be open to them about your struggles, and where they can question you and call you out when you're going down the wrong path, and vice versa, okay? I know, do it for them as well. It's awkward, but you need to warn your friends if you think that they're going to make a life-changing mistake. And you might damage the friendship, but that's what it means to love our friends, to seek their best interest, even if they don't appreciate it at all, if they agree, even if they disagree with you, even if they're like we're not friends anymore, because I think it's said that a person in love is temporarily insane. But you can help your friends take control of their thoughts. We asked the question in the beginning. The question was, what is God's plan for our love life? And we found two ideas from the Bible. The first one is that we need to control our emotions, because love, despite our modern culture, love isn't supposed to be something that controls us and makes us helpless in our thoughts and our actions, but rather it's something we willfully live out in our choices and in our decisions out of our relationship with God. So disciplining ourselves to be in control of ourselves when emotions are high or low is the most loving thing that we can do for others. Second, we need to control our thoughts. We have to catch ourselves and capture our thoughts when we find it wandering to the wrong places. And we can adjust these thoughts by being focused in our faith and in our mission. And this is best done when we are in community and are kept accountable for.